Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Thursday, January 23rd. I hope everybody is having a great day so far. We have a huge show as always. We're going to get into all of the AP awards. The finalists have just been announced for the NFL awards. We're going to break down every single one and pick a winner for the 6 or 7 key awards that take place every single year during the NFL awards show. We'll also get into a little bit of NHL talk as the season is just about halfway done. We'll talk about what the big surprises and factors are heading into the back half of the NHL year. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, January 23rd. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the day, which has to do with those AP awards. This one, of course, the big one, the one that has lots of discussion surrounding it, the AP NFL MVP. And this one has a lot of factors going into it. Obviously, for each award, they nominate 5 people. So we're going to knock them off 5-1 for who's the most or least deserving. And of the 5 that were nominated for the list, the one that I can very confidently say is not going to win it or really stand much of a chance is Jared Goff. Jared Goff had a really good season. He helped lead the Lions to the most successful year in their franchise's history, a top 20 offense of all time. They had 33 points per game. Jared Goff had a really, really good year, but it just wasn't an MVP level season, especially in a race that was so tight this season. Jared Goff just didn't really stand much of a chance. Obviously, they need to find 5 guys, and I don't necessarily mind him being nominated. There's a couple guys that I think I might have even put up ahead of him, but leading your team to the number 1 seed in the NFC, getting that bye, again, 15-2, is pretty impressive, and that's probably one of the reasons why he was nominated over some of these other guys like a Derrick Henry, like a Jamar Chase, like a Patrick Mahomes, who has a similar argument to Jared Goff, just not the same numbers. Jared Goff, I don't really think is going to have enough on it to get it done, but he had a great season and he should be celebrated for that. He was worth all the money that they paid him this offseason. I'm curious if that's going to continue now that coaching staff has been absolutely dismantled. But Jared Goff, one of the top 5 and a finalist for the MVP award, is very impressive to see. Nonetheless, he's not going to get it. My number 4 candidate for this award is going to go to Saquon Barkley. And the reason he's at number 4 and not at number 3 is because he's not a quarterback and because he didn't break the record. Saquon Barkley was so close to breaking the all-time rushing yards record in a single season. He was just 100 yards short from tying, 101 yards from breaking it, and he could have done it against his former team, the New York Giants, but the Eagles decided to sit him out. It stays pat with that 16-game season, so I'm not necessarily mad at it, but Saquon Barkley had a historic year. He broke franchise records for the Eagles. He nearly broke an NFL record. He became one of just 19 players to get over that 2,000-yard rushing mark. He's pretty impressive. Saquon Barkley is amazing. He is a really good back, and he found a perfect system for him. He's going to continue to dominate, and he's still got more football to play. Of course, these being regular season awards, they're not going to take into account the 200-yard performance that he had against the Los Angeles Rams. He's not going to take into account everything that he's done in the playoffs, but he has been amazing thus far, and that's something that I think we need to give a little bit of credit for. Not going to win the MVP, but potentially other awards down the line for Saquon Barkley. At number 3 on the list here, and this is where we start to get into the real MVP debate, I think, we have Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow led the league in almost every single major passing statistic. Joe Burrow led the league in passing yards, in passing touchdowns. He had the most total yards from scrimmage of any player in the NFL at 5,119 yards. Not quite 5,000 yards passing, just 4,918, but he was amazing all year. He set a career high tie for completion percentage this season at 70.6%. He is an incredibly accurate passer. In fact, he is the most accurate passer over a career than anybody else in the entirety of NFL history. He has been amazing. If his team was more successful, if that defense was a little better, and again, we talked about at the beginning of the season, you generally have to win your division at a minimum to win the MVP. And that's something that's very important. It's something that really held back a guy like Lamar Jackson early season in this race when it was him and Josh Allen that were battling for it. If he had found a way to make the playoffs, numbers like that could have made this a lot more interesting. But the Bengals can't find their way into the playoffs despite a torrid run down the stretch for them there. This is going to be a season that's not going to get a lot of notice in NFL history, but it was the best statistical season of the year. So he's a guy that deserves a lot of credit, and in my opinion, should finish third in MVP voting. As we get to the top two, it always was going to be these two guys, right? It's been the debate for basically the last half of the season, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. And I've written articles, I've talked about this in the past, about who I think should win this MVP award. But right now, as it stands, my number two, and subsequently my number one, Josh Allen is my number two, and Lamar Jackson is my number one. We're going to start off with why Josh Allen does not end up winning the award. We're going to go straight numbers, and I know that's not fair necessarily for Josh Allen because this isn't just a numbers award, right? I'm well aware that the MVP isn't just who gets the best statistics because, like I said, then it would have gone to Joe Burrow. It comes with a lot of other things as well, but those things I think Lamar Jackson did a great job of as well, right? Josh Allen has 3,731 passing yards. That's good enough for 14th in the NFL. And I know he doesn't just do everything through the air. He also added 531 yards on the ground, putting him over 4,000 yards on the season at just over 4,200 yards. So he had a good season for total yards, but it just wasn't enough overall. He finished with 40 total touchdowns on the season, 28 of them passing, 12 of them rushing. Good enough for his fifth straight season with 40-plus touchdowns. That is crazy. That is an NFL record. He broke NFL records for longevity or for success up to this point. The most points, yards, and total touchdowns ever put up, and the most wins, I should say, ever put up by an NFL quarterback in their first 6 seasons all go to Josh Allen. He has set an incredible mark, played an incredible career, and had an incredible season, but he keeps running into these great seasons from these other quarterbacks that came in at similar or the same times. Case in point, Lamar Jackson, who's about to win, in my opinion, his third MVP. And it's not just because the AP voted him as the first team and Josh Allen as the second team, but because he is doing stuff this season that we have barely ever seen on a historical standard, right? He has the 4th best passer rating in the history of the NFL, trailing guys like Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning only. Aaron Rodgers had beaten him twice, Peyton Manning beat him once, but a passer rating of 119.6 on the season is ridiculous. People clown on him all the time for not being able to be a pocket passer, but he has really lit it up through the air. He had the 6th most passing yards on the year, Lamar Jackson did, finishing with 4,172 yards, 41 pass touchdowns, only trailing Joe Burrow. His interceptions, just 4 of them. That is only the second time in NFL history that a quarterback has had 40-plus passing touchdowns and 5 or less interceptions on a season. Again, with Aaron Rodgers, that's pretty good company to be with. That is only trailing Justin Herbert for full-time starters in the NFL as far as interceptions go, and he tacked on nearly 1,000 yards on the ground, 915 yards, which is good for 20th best in the entire NFL. That is with a backfield that had Derrick Henry, who rushed for 1,900 yards on the season. That is a backfield that rushed for almost 3,000 yards, and if you count the playoff games, they rushed for 2,000 and 1,000 respectively. That is a crazy offense led by Lamar Jackson. They find a way to win that division. He finishes with 5,087 total yards on the season and 45 total touchdowns. That's ridiculous. That is crazy. That is not numbers that you expect a guy like Lamar Jackson to just be able to put up. I know he won the MVP last year, and it's been a bit since we had back-to-back MVPs, at least dating back to Aaron Rodgers back around COVID 2020, 2021. But this is a case where he absolutely deserves it. And I also think that Josh Allen deserves it. I think, honestly, we could go all the way down to a guy like Saquon Barkley, who could deserve the MVP this season. But it's just when you're going up against a guy who is making history, who is doing things that we have never seen before, who is doing things at a level that we have never seen before in Lamar Jackson, it's just a tough break you run into sometimes. And Josh Allen has played a career where he deserves an MVP, but that's not how the MVP award works at the end of the day. The MVP award goes to the most valuable player in a season. And people can bring up last season. They can say, oh, but Lamar Jackson's numbers weren't the best last season. You're right. His numbers weren't the best last season, but neither were Josh Allen's. Even though his numbers were better, Josh Allen this season, the reason he's in MVP conversations above everything else is that he let his interception numbers and turnover numbers dwindle to a near minimum. He only threw 6 interceptions on the season. That is by far his career best. He has always been a gunslinger. He's been a little more cautious this season, which is why his numbers aren't quite eye-popping like it is. And some of it's to his detriment, some of it isn't. But what he's done this season with the lack of a true number one receiver, with the lack of turnovers, is why he's in this conversation and why he wasn't in this conversation last year. Last year, we were talking about Christian McCaffrey. We were talking about Brock Purdy. We were talking about Dak Prescott, right? Josh Allen wasn't really entering into the conversation because he just turned the ball over too much. No one is doubting his talent, but this is just something that he is going to have to fight through. He's going to get an MVP at some point in his career, and if he doesn't, it's going to be because he keeps running into these historic seasons. He deserves it. If there's any year to give out a co-MVP, it's this one. But the AP has changed up the way that they do voting. It's not just you get one vote for MVP, it's ranked choice voting now. You get first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, right? You get to vote for those guys, and then you just get points off of that, right? It definitely changes the way that it works, so it's going to be a lot harder to get co-MVPs. But if it ever happens, this is the year that it deserves to happen. I don't see it happening, though, because like I said, the AP's already voted on this kind of thing already. Not necessarily, but for that AP All-Pro first team and second team, they went with Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen, and I don't blame them. I'm taking Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen every single time this year, and it just sucks that Josh Allen, who is an amazing quarterback, has to go against history every single time he's up for this award. But let me know what your thoughts are. Who do you have as your MVP? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the race that I think is the most interesting outside of the MVP, the coach of the year. There are so many deserving candidates. There are so many guys out there that I think could win this award. We'll talk about who I have winning it, why I have them winning it, and why I think all 4 or 5 of these guys could deserve to win this award this season. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.